ducked off low key, yeah, you know me. Kickin' with Tyree, hit it three like Kyrie.
How
Hey,
you guys doing?
we're good.
Great.
Ooh, all right. Tyree, I'm just gonna get right into it since we only got 15 minutes. All right. What was the spark of this project for you guys? What pulled you guys all in?
Well, we know that the majority of people in America support abortion, like actually a growingly large majority of people support abortion. And yet we can also see at the same time access to abortion is dropping rapidly. So we wondered what is going on screen? What are people seeing in film and television that might be contributing to the messaging that's maybe driving some of the politics?
Hmm. You and or are you going? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think one other really important thing is we were all at Sundance together in 2020. We had a short there called Abortion Helpline. This is Lisa, and while there, we saw this fantastic documentary called Disclosure by Sam Fader, which looks at depictions of trans people on screen, and it was a really like fascinating watch to understand like how much of our own biases about trans people and perceptions of trans people had been influenced by what we've seen. And so I think that was sort of the that created like the nugget of what would this mean for a story about abortion? Like how could what would that look like in terms of abortion?
And I think the other thing is when we started talking about, we finished Abortion Helpline in 2020 when we screened it at Sundance. And about a year later, when we started talking about another film, we could kind of see the writing on the wall of what was going to happen with the Supreme Court. Trump had already nominated two anti-abortion justices. That was his mission. Then Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, so another one came onto the court. And so when we started making this before the Dobbs decision, but that was like looming over us that was we could tell that was going to happen.
But also,
Um,
we also thought it was really interesting that when we started floating this idea to folks, we would say, "So when do you remember seeing an abortion on TV or in a movie?" And people be like, never, I don't know, and then we'd say, "Well, did you watch Dirty Dancing? Did you watch Maude? Have you seen Grey's Anatomy?" And they're like, "Oh, right." So that sort of showed us that people see these things, but they aren't really it's like affecting them subliminally, but they don't really remember. So we wanted to put it all together.
talking about the movies that you examined, were there any portrayals that might have surprised you, either them being ahead of his time or because it had a larger impact than people realize?
I'm sure all three of us have an answer for this. Can I?
Go ahead.
I think the interesting one for me was looking back at Juno again. Juno was definitely controversial at the time, but when I saw it, I was like, "Hey, this is this like cool movie with like snappy dialogue and fun characters, um, and it's like a well-directed movie, but then it has this like really awful depiction of an abortion clinic, and I think that movie definitely had an influence on me without realizing it. And certainly, there's many, many, many examples, but it's interesting to go back to films that you hold in really high regard and then see like, oh yeah, that wasn't really quite what I thought. And I went to Janet and Barbara, they both had answers too, I'm sure.
Um, yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I actually when I watched Juno, I remember being because I had already been around abortion clinics and talked to my friends about their abortions and stuff by the time I saw Juno. Um, when I saw Juno, I was like, oh, that is the girl who gets an abortion. So I had a different reaction when I saw Juno. I think for me, the film that I went back and watched while we were making this movie was Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and I like that had totally gone by me at the time that Jennifer Jason Leigh just is like, oh, I'm pregnant, darn it, I'm and she just does what a high school kid who has enough money to go to the abortion clinic does. What about you, Barbara?
Well, I think for me, the most astounding film was Blonde. And I don't know if I would have watched it so many times if we hadn't been making this film, but it brought back so many memories of like Silent Scream, of early anti-abortion films, in which the fetus is portrayed as as like a baby. So I was just like astounded that that was being done in 2020, 2022, that a film like that was being made. And I watched it many times. And I mean, Anna de Armas does an amazing job as her role as Marilyn Monroe, but I just couldn't believe that this is the way that a film that was being made today was treating this subject. So I think that was it for me.
Hmm. This is a documentary that spans across kind of decades and different generations. Um, what patterns did you notice in the way that, women reproductive choices and their autonomy has been portrayed across different generations?
Yeah, well, interestingly, we start out with Maud, which was 1972, and that's, when abortion, it was right before Roe, but it was when abortion was legal in New York. And and Maud's grandmother at the time, her daughter points out to her like, "Mom, you don't have to do this. It's legal now." And Maud and her husband, just make this decision, and it's Maud, he says it's your decision. You're the one who's going to have to live with it. So you start out in 72 with this idea that, women have control of their lives. And gradually, over the next couple decades, you see that being eroded by, boyfriends and husbands on screen telling, telling women that they should get to have the last word or that they should be ashamed and this isn't just from their boyfriends, they're also hearing it from their parents or from their community, but you start to see that right being eroded. Today we see a lot of creators in Hollywood trying to push back, and trying to make accurate stories. But overall, you've seen this arc. What do you think, guys?
I think it was surprising for me to see shows like Girls and Sex and the City, which I think of as, handling social issues in a kind of modern progressive way, and to see how they handled abortion, where the characters on these shows like just didn't get abortions. They talked about it. They were just like about to go to the clinic. Some of them were at the clinic and then they just couldn't do it. And I just found that so surprising in shows that I wouldn't have thought would have treated the subject that way. And then I think also Girls has an episode where the Adam Driver character just like lashes out at his girlfriend for getting an abortion. So it's like the male rage. I was yeah, I was surprised to see that when we started making this film. I would have not have expected that in shows like that, and didn't think about it when I saw these episodes when they first came out.
I guess the last thing I'd add to that is that there's the film really tries to create this dialogue between what's happening politically and what's happening on screen. And for me, for example, like growing up in the 90s, and that was the time of Clinton's calling abortion, abortion should be safe, legal, and rare, which is in some ways like seemed like a positive thing at the time, right? It felt progressive, but then when you really think about it, you're like, oh no, that's giving it this sort of stigma. And to see the extent to which that was reflected back on screen was really kind of like amazing for me. So that time period where you see shows like Party of Five or 90210 and all of those sort of those very popular shows of the moment, stigmatizing abortion in their own depictions. It's pretty fascinating too.
And you want it to be depicted correctly because there's so many different circumstances that call for it, whether there's, different, things going on with the body during pregnancy. It could save someone's life. There's just different things that, cause for it that aren't necessarily that the women want to get rid of the baby. It's that the baby won't survive or they won't survive sometimes. And I think that needs to be depicted a little bit better, and people need to understand that part of it as well. As
Yeah.
this film Arise post Roe, did that increase the, urgency of telling this story?
Sure. Right now, more people are actually having abortions since Dobbs, which is an interesting sort of contradiction considering the number of barriers that have been thrown up. But we also see states starting to push for legislation to criminalize even information about abortion. And so I think this speaks to your point of the urgency for making this film, because we know that so many people are getting their information from television. They may be getting, misinformation from whatever social media channels they're watching, or they might be getting, information that reinforces what they already think. But television and film has this rare opportunity to actually give accurate information. And you see creators like Shonda Rhimes taking that responsibility really seriously in her shows like Grey's Anatomy, where they have doctors vet all the information and they want to talk about these issues honestly. But this is where people are going to be getting their trusted information about medication abortion, the most common form of abortion, about, as you mentioned, Tyree, fetal anomalies, which can be dangerous to the mother who's carrying the pregnancy.
Um, Many of the viewers might, expect Hollywood to be more progressive on the issue. Did your research reveal more of a complicated story than people might expect?
Yeah, Mike, you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was really surprising because you have this assumption that Hollywood is very like liberal. You basically say that. To me, it was really shocking to see shows as Barbara mentioned earlier, like Sex and the City, which I always thought of as like a very progressive, like feminist show, is in fact like, oh, it has this very sort of retrograde depiction of abortion and stigmatizes it in a way. And I think it's just a reflection of the way in which all of these stereotypes and tropes have persisted over the years. It's a shame.
Well, I remember when I went to see Blonde in the theater, I went despite the fact that critics had all said, it's not that respectful or honest about who Marilyn is. Maybe you shouldn't see it. And then I got there and it's like, wait, nobody mentioned that there's a talking fetus in the movie, implying that she's going to abort me, the baby. And this was totally overlooked. The filmmaker was considered, a progressive Hollywood filmmaker.
I think it'll be interesting to see the impact of all these mergers coming along in Hollywood, that the FCC is agreeing to, and how that will impact storytelling and what we see on the screen. I mean, Mara Tierce, who is a writer for Orange is the New Black, talks in our film about how after she finished writing, after that show ended and she finished writing for it, she tried to pitch an abortion story, and she went like all over, Hollywood pitching this story. She's like a recognized writer, and people would say to her, "Oh yeah, that's really nice, but we can't. It's too hot for us." And it'll be interesting to see what is now going to be, too hot for Hollywood. What are we going to end up with?
Great. My last question, real quick one. If you could add one film or television episode to the curriculum of every film school in America, what would it be?
Oh, no question. Grey's Anatomy on the border, I think. What do you guys think?
I,
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say Fast Times at Ridgemont High. That's a good one, and I think it's yeah, that's my favorite, my pick.
Oh, you're thinking one that's positive or one that's negative? Because on the negative side, I would say Blonde. I would add Blonde to show like the dangers of what can await us.
Yeah. Or you could add the movie that states are actually mandating should be shown in classrooms, which is Baby Olivia. But that's already in the curriculum.
Wow.
Um,
Thank you guys. I appreciate you guys. I I didn't know there was even that's how it flew by my head. There was even an abortion scene in Fast Times. I was trying to
Yeah,
think about it. I was like, where is it?
it's like just happens, and it's I think it's like a testament to how great it's such a good movie. Like I think one thing in working on this film, because we watch so much television and so many movies, to see like what's really held up over time and what hasn't. And I thought that was like fascinating, and I'd always have these conversations on the side, and that movie has held up to me. It's still just as entertaining, just as like thoughtful, also really like fun and funny. I'm sure there are other problems in it which we can't get into now, but like that depiction is really great. And it's a great movie.
Well, I think that's all the time I have with you
Okay,
guys. I appreciate you guys and can't wait to see it at Tribeca. I hope you guys have a great festival and a great
Great.
rest of
Thank
your
you,
day.
Tyree.
thank you.
See it.
Ducked off low key, yeah, you know me. Kick it with Tyree, hit it three like Kyrie.